Hey guys, Scott here. Today I want to talk about Trapper, the forgotten poster child of Dead by Daylight, one of the most neglected killers in the entire game, again, despite being the actual face of the entire video game. It's definitely weird that they chose Trapper compared to, I don't know, like Billy, someone that's like actually a threat, but it was the first killer they actually made, and so they want to stick with that, and I can respect that at the very least, but still, it seems like Trapper's one of those killers that has been left in the dust and power crept by a lot of other killers, mainly due to problems of time efficiency and just gens going way too fast before you can even set up your web of traps to make him an effective killer. Now, Trapper is very commonly seen on the lower end of tier lists. He is definitely not seen as a very decent killer in any regards whatsoever, and at the same time, he's also one of those killers that people still don't really like going against. Even though he's not, you know, an S-tier killer or anything like that, people still don't like going against him because the counterplay to him is not particularly exciting. It's just follow him around and just break his traps, or don't follow him around and then you just randomly step into a trap that's in some grass you could not possibly see. So it's not an exciting experience, really. But I will say playing as Trapper, when you get your web set up and you start corralling people into it, that can feel pretty good. So at least there's playing as him can be pretty fun. But I firmly am of the belief that every setup killer, it just can't be fun to go against. It's just, there's no way to really make it like that, and that's just really the core design of making a trap-based killer in general. But that's all an aside here. Today I want to talk about the actual strength of Trapper. My take here is that legitimately he is like a high B tier killer, legitimately almost an A tier killer, and I know that sounds like clickbait, and I promise it's not. The point is, when you make a tier list, how do you define where the placements are? You don't define placements based off of, you know, well, if he's just not using any add-ons and he's not very good at the killer, that's where we'll make our placements. Like, if that was the idea, then, you know, Nurse would not be so high on a tier list. Let's look at a more realistic example like Spirit. Spirit without add-ons? Kind of not that great. If you're not running cooldown reduction or movement or something like that, she actually has pretty shitty map control. That's, I think, an entirely separate video that I think Spirit is one of the most add-on dependent killers in the entire game. But if we, you know, take into account how tier lists are made, we still have Spirit rated very highly, because that's assuming you will be using one of those add-ons, because why would you not? There's no reason not to. Nobody runs no add-ons like ever anymore. So it's always under the assumption that you're going to be using good add-ons, and that's why Spirit is rated so highly. But I feel like we don't give Trapper that same benefit for some reason, because if you run Trapper's best add-ons, he's actually pretty fucking good. Like, he's strong. Not even like, oh, he's pretty decent. Like, he's actively like better than most killers in the entire game. And that's basically because of two add-ons, and the two add-ons that completely negate his main weaknesses. The first one we'll go over is Iridescent Stone. Iridescent Stone is the add-on that makes it so your traps automatically reset themselves. So one of Trapper's main giant weaknesses is his setup phase. He has to do it at the start of the match. But luckily, you have things like Corrupt Intervention that can typically help you, and most Trappers are going to run that because you just need to in order to have enough time to set up your web of traps, and then you can go forward and actually start playing the game. The problem is, after that initial setup phase, eventually traps will be disabled. You'll use some traps. Some traps will be used up, you know, by people walking in them and stuff like that. You'll have picked up some, but basically there will be another setup phase and another setup phase and another setup phase. And every time you have a setup phase, you are just losing time so bad, because a killer's time is 4 times as valuable as a survivor's time. Just, you know, if you don't understand what that means, basically when a Trapper goes to set up a trap somewhere and he walks to a place and puts the trap down, that's 4 people that are working on generators while the Trapper is just doing nothing at that current time. Now, eventually it should pay off and get it down on something like that, and that's great. But the point is, every time you go to set a trap, the entire team is just doing whatever the hell they want. And that you just can't afford to do that in modern DBD. There's just, you're not afforded that luxury to have enough free time for that to actually happen. So that is the main issue. It's the time efficiency of this setup phase for Trapper, and Iridescent Stone makes it so you only have one setup phase at the start of the match, and that's it for the rest of the match. You set up your good traps. Maybe you pick up 1 or 2 to change them later in the game, but for the most part, you trap all of the problem areas, and that's it. Now you're in chase mode for the rest of the entire game. You no longer have that giant problem of needing multiple setup phases for the entire match. Corrupt Intervention takes care of your first setup phase, and then you're chasing the rest of the game. I can't stress how important that is in terms of pressure and map control. No longer are you just, you know, walking back to shack to reset a trap or something. It's happening by itself. So you're just constantly applying pressure to the survivors, and yet they are still constantly under the threat of running into your traps. I cannot stress how strong that is. You could also do really dirty techniques like with endgame, perks like Remember Me combined. You can put a trap underneath the exit gate, the power switch, and then if a survivor tries to open it and they're not the obsession with Remember Me, they physically cannot open it because the trap will reset before they even finish. So there's a lot of dirty stuff you can do with that as well. But the whole point is time efficiency. It removes every subsequent setup phase and makes him just constantly be chasing, so that triples his map pressure, and it just makes him so much stronger. Now, the other add-on in the iridescent category is Bloody Coil. Bloody Coil makes it so whenever you disable a trap, you become injured. That doesn't sound like a huge deal, but I can't stress how incredibly strong that is, because again, it's a time efficiency thing. When a trapper goes to set up a trap, that's 4 people that are just working on gens. I mean, maybe someone's on a hook, whatever, but 4 people are basically doing whatever they want unimpeded. That's 4 people's time being used however they want, and the trapper is just, doing this to set up one trap that may or may not even do anything. When a survivor goes to disable a trap, it's not that big of a deal, because unless all 4 survivors are spreading out and, disabling 4 traps, the time efficiency will always be in favor of one survivor disabling one trap. However, with Bloody Coil, that's no longer the case, because now that survivor becomes injured. And if that survivor is injured, that just builds in game delay by default. Either your next chase with that survivor will be half the duration because they're already injured, or they're going to spend time healing, running to someone to get healed. There's going to be a time when that actually starts swinging in favor of the killer in terms of time efficiency, and that's just why it's so strong. Now, you can make the argument someone could stay injured and run around and disabling all your traps and stuff, but they're 10 times easier to find, they're much easier to down. It's still good for you as killer. Yeah, you might have a guy that just decides to do that, but you can also just find that guy and down him, and it's going to be a lot easier because he's already injured. But still, time efficiency wise, Bloody Coil and all that is still very strong, but the most important part about Bloody Coil that makes it so disgustingly strong is how good it is at defending the basement. If you are running Bloody Coil on Trapper and you hook someone in the basement early game, you just win the game. You would need a coordinated competitive 4-man Survive with Friends in order to combat Bloody Coil Trapper basement. I would actually say Bloody Coil Trapper basement is the scariest basement in the entire game. I think it's even worse than Bubba, because at least with Bubba, you could force someone in locker or something like that. You can end the team sweep by doing something like that. With Trapper, with Bloody Coil, you can't even get into you physically can't enter the basement, because if you try to disable one of the traps, you become injured, and the trapper just hits you before you even get down the stairs. Now, normally how you do a basement save, it's still complicated even without trapper and any of this stuff, but basically the first person runs in to go down the stairs, gets hit, and immediately fucks off. While that person is getting hit, another person drops down the stairs and is able to get the unhook before the person, gets the actual hit and interrupts it. Now you've got 3 injured people, but they're all out of the basement. That's typically how a basement save would work when you're even remotely coordinated. With Trapper, you can't do that if he's got Bloody Coil, because as soon as you break the trap, you're injured and you can't enter the basement. It'll just hit you and slug you, and now there's 2 people in the basement and you're just fucked. The amount of the amount of coordination that goes into saving against a Bloody Coil Trapper, it's unrealistic. You're just never going to get a team that can counter that. And I don't think I can say that about any killer in the game. When they get you into the basement early and you have that add-on, you can't save them. The game is, or maybe not the game is over, but that person is dead. If the killer really wants that person to die, they are going to die. And it's I don't know how you can take one of the strongest basements in the entire game due to an add-on and then just say this killer is not that good. There are very few killers that once you get into the basement, that's just your win condition. You already just win the match. There's no coming back from that anymore. And that is what Bloody Coil enables you to do. That's the key strength of it. And it's not particularly hard to get into that if you've got Iron Grasp and Agitation. So that is, I think, what makes Trapper so unbelievably strong. It's the potential he has with his best add-ons. Now, no add-on Trapper or any other add-on Trapper, dog shit. He's not good. But if you were making a tier list based on how strong the killer can be, Trapper can be an extremely strong killer that's better than most killers in the game. So that's why I think Trapper is actually high B tier, because if you rate him by his best add-ons, which are so far and above everything else, he genuinely is. Ideally, you would work to put some elements of this base kit and nerf those add-ons. That would probably be a better idea, but as long as these add-ons exist, he's actually an incredibly strong threat.